If you're hearing this, it means I found a way back, or at least left behind a trace for someone who still believes history isn't a straight line, but a circle. I can't tell whether I died or simply slipped between the layers of time, but I remember the sound of earth collapsing, the howl of wind through the tunnel, and the smell of stone cracking open after millennia of silence. My name is Elias Ward. I was an archaeologist, a man who made a living chasing the echoes of the dead. I used to think that if one could understand the past deeply enough, one might prevent the tragedies of the present. Then cruelly, the past swallowed me whole. The cave-in at Abydos was supposed to be an accident, yet when I opened my eyes, the sand was gone. In its place burned the gold light of a sun, cleaner, harsher, untouched by the centuries. I heard oxen pulling stone, men shouting in a language I had only ever read on clay tablets. And when I looked down at my hands, they were rough, sun-darkened, and strong. Not the hands of a scholar, but of a builder. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, oxygen deprivation, brain misfiring. But then I breathed, felt the sharp scent of resin, the metallic tang of bronze tools, and I knew. I was living inside the civilization I had once excavated. I wasn't an observer anymore. I was part of it. Something or someone had brought me here, not to watch, but to write what would one day be unearthed. I don't know if I've been chosen or punished, perhaps both. Since that morning, I've tried to document everything, signs, voices, details, like a man terrified of being erased from time. Yet each night, when I look up and see the same stars I mapped in modern sky charts, I wonder, if history is happening for the first time, then who am I in it? The witness, the scribe, or the origin of the myth I once believed to be ancient? This isn't the story of a man reborn in the past. It's a confession from someone who realized that history doesn't need to be written. It only needs someone brave or foolish enough to live it. And it all began that first morning when I stepped out of a mud brick house, saw the half-built pyramid gleaming against the horizon, and heard someone call my name in a tongue I somehow understood, though I never remembered learning it. Eliashar, they said, and for the first time in my life, or in my many lives, I answered. The first breath of that morning still lives inside me, dry air spiced with dust and fire, the kind of air that seems to hold memory. When I stepped outside, dawn stretched wide across a plain of gold and ochre. Workers were already moving through the haze, men carrying limestone blocks, women hauling water from jars, children running barefoot along the ridges of sand. Someone shouted again, "Eliashar!" I turned instinctively, and a young man with dark eyes waved from a distance, beckoning me toward the quarry road. He was smiling, unaware that I had no idea who he was. My body, however, moved before my mind could stop it, my feet remembering paths I had never walked. The village was a cluster of mud brick dwellings clinging to the edge of the desert. Beyond it rose the great monument, unfinished but immense. From afar, it looked like a mountain born from human will. Up close, it trembled with sound, chisels, pulleys, and shouted commands. I should have been terrified, but there was a strange calm in me, like a man inside a dream he didn't want to end. Every sense was awake, the heat against my skin, the smell of sweat and earth, the rough linen tunic I wore, coarse but familiar. The young man who called me reached me grinning. "You're late, brother. Overseer Nefer's been asking for you since sunrise." Brother. The word hit like a blow and a blessing. My lips answered on their own. "Tell him I'm on my way." The voice wasn't mine. Deeper, steadier. It carried a rhythm shaped by another world. For a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of it, but my legs kept walking. My hands knew how to tie the leather strap around my waist, how to adjust the copper tool hanging there. I was someone here, not Elias Ward, PhD, lecturer at the British Institute. I was Aliyah Shar, whoever that was. By midday, I reached the worksite. The heat was merciless. Men shouted instructions from wooden scaffolds. The stone itself seemed to hum, alive with vibration. Nefer, the overseer, stood under a shade canopy, his bald head gleaming with oil. He saw me, frowned, then gestured sharply. "You were with the priest last night again, weren't you?" he said. "They'll fill your head with madness. Leave the gods to their walls and focus on your task." I opened my mouth, half to deny, half to ask what on earth he meant. But my body spoke first. "They sought only counsel, overseer, nothing more." His gaze softened a little. "You always say that." He turned back to the wall where carvings were taking shape. Processions of figures, gods and men entwined. He traced the line of one unfinished relief with his finger. "The high priest wants this finished before the equinox. He says it will open the way for the sun god's return." I stared at the image. The god's profile, falcon-headed, crowned with a solar disk, was one I had studied for years in museum basements. But here it was alive, fresh under the chisel. The detail was stunning. My hands itched. Without thinking, I picked up a stylus and began adjusting the curvature of the lines, softening the divine features, bringing human tenderness to the jaw and mouth. Nefer barked, "Eliashar!" but then stopped, watched. The workers gathered around as the relief shifted beneath my hand. The falcon god now seemed to breathe. It was subtle but real, the kind of detail lost to centuries of erosion. Nefer's anger turned to curiosity. "Where did you learn that technique?" The question struck me silent. Where indeed? From the British Museum? From lectures on artistic realism? From an age thousands of years too late to exist? I could only answer, it felt right. That night the village buzzed with whispers. "Eliashar touched the god's face and made it move," someone said. Others murmured about signs and omens. When I returned to my dwelling, exhaustion hit me in waves. I sat on the threshold, watching the sun bleed out behind the horizon. The desert wind cooled my skin. Everything around me glowed with a strange holiness, mundane yet eternal. I found a clay shard and began to scratch notes into it. I had no paper, no pen, but my mind still worked like a researcher's. "Date uncertain," I wrote in broken glyphs. "Physical vessel, unknown. Environment consistent with Old Kingdom construction phase, circa 2600 BCE. Cognitive awareness intact." I stopped there, because writing those words made something inside me tremble. What if documenting this world meant changing it? What if every record became a seed for what I once called history? Then came a sound, soft footsteps behind me. I turned. A woman stood there holding a water jar. Her eyes were green, unusual, startling. They caught the last of the sun like polished glass. "You shouldn't work after dark," she said. Her accent rolled the words into music. "I wasn't working," I answered. "Just thinking." She smiled faintly. "Thinking is the work of gods. The rest of us only survive." Her name, I would later learn, was Sahira, daughter of a stonemason. But that night, she was just a figure in twilight, a reminder that even here, at the dawn of civilization, human kindness existed. She set the jar beside me. "Drink. The heat steals memory." I drank. Coolness spread through me. "Do we know each other?" I asked. She studied me for a long moment. "Everyone knows you, Eliashar, the man who draws the breath of gods into stone." And just like that, I realized my past life's pursuit to uncover history had reversed itself. Now I was the mystery. Later, when I lay beneath the woven mat that served as a roof, I whispered to the darkness, "If this is real, what am I meant to do?" The stars didn't answer, but somewhere beyond the dunes, a drum began to beat. A deep, steady pulse that seemed to echo my own heart. It was not a dream. It was the beginning. The next morning began with the sound of stone, steady, rhythmic, inevitable. Hammers struck chisel, chisel struck faith. The workers shaped eternity with their bare hands, and somehow I was one of them. By now, whispers had spread. Men glanced at me when they passed, their eyes heavy with curiosity and a little fear. I wasn't just Eliashar the artisan anymore. I was the man who made the god's face breathe. In a world ruled by omens, that was enough to make you either sacred or dangerous. Nefer the overseer avoided me. When he did speak, his words were sharp but uncertain, as if he wasn't sure whether to reprimand or protect me. "Do your work quietly," he muttered one afternoon as we traced the walls. "The priests have heard the rumors. They're not fond of miracles that don't come from them." That night, while the others feasted, I stayed by the wall. The torches flickered. Shadows of gods danced across the stone. I traced the lines I had carved earlier that week, wondering whose history I was writing, and whether it would still exist when I was gone. Sahira appeared again, silent as the dusk. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "They're saying you defy the divine order." I looked at her, at the gentle tremor of fear in her voice. "Do you believe that?" She hesitated. "I believe the gods speak through men, but not every man who hears them survives." Her words settled in me like sand after a storm. For a moment we just stood there, the sound of distant drums fading into the dark. Then she handed me something, a fragment of pottery etched with unfamiliar symbols. "What's this?" I asked. "A piece of the old temple," she said. "My father found it buried beneath the foundations. He said it shouldn't exist yet." The shard glowed faintly in the firelight. The carvings, flowing curves, the sun's eye, and a figure kneeling beneath it were unmistakable. I had seen them before, in Abydos, in my own time. Something twisted in my chest. Where did he find it exactly? "In the lower pit, near the well." I turned the shard over, tracing its lines with my thumb. It was weathered, aged centuries beyond anything that should exist here. Either this was a relic from a civilization even older than this one, or I had found the first evidence of a paradox. When I looked up again, Sahira was watching me closely. "You look as though you've seen the end of the world," she whispered. "Maybe I have," I murmured. The following day, Nefer summoned me to the upper platform where the priests worked. It was unusual. Common laborers weren't allowed near the sanctum walls, but my presence had been requested. The high priest, a tall man wrapped in white linen and gold thread, stood beside a burning brazier. His eyes were sharp, the kind that didn't see you so much as measure you. "You are Eliashar, the artisan?" he asked. "Yes, revered one." He circled me slowly. "They say you gave life to the god's image. Is that true?" "I only shaped the stone," I said carefully. "The life was always there." He studied me for a long, unbearable silence. Then he nodded once. "Good answer. The gods despise pride, but they reward precision." He motioned for me to follow him deeper into the temple, into a chamber filled with half-finished carvings. The air was cooler here, scented with incense and age. On one wall was an enormous relief, still rough, but hauntingly familiar. It showed the same god I had sculpted before, wings spread, standing over a river of stars. But below him were men, kneeling, chained, reaching upward. And at the bottom corner, half sketched, was the outline of a single figure holding a stylus. My heart stopped. It was me. The same posture, the same stance, even the same tool I carried. The priest watched my face. "You recognize it." I couldn't breathe. "How long has this been here?" "Longer than I have served," he said. "The prophecy speaks of a man who will carve the god's image so perfectly that it will awaken. Some believe that act will summon a new age. Others call it blasphemy." He leaned closer. "Tell me, Eliashar, are you a prophet or a fraud?" The question cut deeper than a knife. In my time, I had lived by reason, by evidence, excavation, and carbon dating. Now that same mind was being interrogated by the past it once tried to explain. I don't know, I said honestly. The priest smiled faintly, a gesture neither kind nor cruel. Then you are dangerous. He turned away, leaving me alone with the unfinished wall, the image of myself staring back from the stone, as if history itself were mocking me. That night I returned to my hut, trembling. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, but the shard Sahira had given me burned in my mind. A relic from the future, a carving from the past that showed my face. It was impossible. Unless time wasn't a river at all, unless it was a circle, and I had just walked into its center. Sahira found me again near midnight. She didn't speak at first. She just sat beside me, her hair undone, her hands resting on her knees. You look like a man carrying too many centuries, she said softly. I think I might be, I replied. She reached out, touched the back of my hand. Tentative, human, real. Then maybe you should let someone else carry a little of it. For the first time since waking in this world, I let silence hold me instead of fear. Outside, the stars wheeled above us, ancient and indifferent. But I had begun to sense something strange beneath their light. The pulse of the same drum I'd heard that first night. It wasn't from the workers. It wasn't from the temples. It was coming from beneath the earth. Slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The gods weren't sleeping, and history, it seemed, was already remembering me. Days passed, but the feeling of being watched did not fade. The workers' chatter quieted when I approached. The priests lingered near the scaffolds more often, whispering behind veils of incense smoke. And through it all, the drums under the earth pulsed faintly, like the world breathing through stone. I tried to bury myself in work, chiseling, carving, sketching new designs into soft clay. My hands knew what to do, even when my mind faltered. Yet sometimes the tool would slip and create patterns that weren't mine. Circles inside circles, spirals like stars collapsing. Every archaeologist's instinct in me screamed pattern recognition. But to these people, those shapes were prayers. Sahira started visiting during the afternoons. She claimed she came to bring water, but I think she was watching over me, or perhaps watching to see whether I would unravel. She had the patience of one who had seen too many men break under the weight of their own faith. One afternoon, when the sun turned the air into liquid fire, I found her sitting in the shadow of a half-finished column. Her fingers traced the grooves of a carving absent-mindedly. You carve as though the stone might answer you, she said. Maybe it does, I replied. She tilted her head, amused. You don't talk like the others. It's as if your tongue learned truth from another sky. I smiled despite myself. And yet you understand me perfectly. For a moment, there was no sound but the wind scraping against the sand. Then she said quietly, Perhaps I've heard your voice before, in dreams. Her words startled me. I almost asked what kind of dreams, but before I could, Nefer's voice thundered across the yard. Eliashar, the high priest demands you at the sanctuary. Sahira's expression changed, fear this time not for herself. Whatever he asks, be careful what you give him. The temple interior was cold, unnaturally so. The light filtered through narrow vents, painting gold stripes on the stone. The high priest awaited me beside a basin filled with water so still it looked like polished obsidian. There are disturbances, he said. The omens are restless. You will help us read them. I'm no priest, I replied. He smiled thinly. No, but the gods have touched you whether you wished it or not. Now look. He gestured toward the basin. When I leaned over it, the reflection wasn't my face. It was the carving I had made days ago, the falcon god shimmering with impossible life. Its eyes glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. I staggered back. What is this? The image responded to your touch, the priest said. You awakened it. We need to know how. I didn't awaken anything. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Lies offend the gods, Eliashar. Tell me, what power do you serve? What knowledge do you carry that our ancestors did not? I wanted to tell him the truth, that I was a man out of time, a foreigner wearing the skin of his own legend. But reason still tethered me. Who would believe it? They'd carve my confession onto the same wall as the monsters. I only serve the work, I said. Stone remembers the hands that shape it. That's all. He stared at me for a long while, then motioned for his guards to leave. Very well, but remember, creation binds the creator. You can't bring life into form without giving a piece of yourself. His words lingered as I walked back through the corridor of shadows. They sounded less like theology and more like warning. That evening, I found Sahira near the well again. The twilight turned her eyes to green fire. She handed me a loaf of barley bread, her fingers brushing mine for a heartbeat too long. You were with the priests again, she said softly. I think they're afraid of me. They should be. Her tone wasn't teasing this time. She looked at the horizon where the pyramid's silhouette bit into the sky. They say the gods speak through dreams, but sometimes dreams speak of gods that shouldn't wake. I tore the bread in half and offered her a piece. You sound like someone who's seen too much. She hesitated, then took it. My father used to say time runs backward for those who build tombs. Every stone we lift is a step closer to the underworld. And then why keep building? Because it's all we know how to do. We ate in silence. Around us, the workers' torches began to light, tiny constellations in the desert night. And for the first time since I had awakened here, I felt something almost human again. Not belonging exactly, but connection. Later, when she rose to leave, she paused. Eliashar, if you ever feel the earth moving beneath you, don't run. Listen. To what? To whatever remembers your name. She disappeared into the darkness, her silhouette swallowed by torchlight and dust. I sat there long after she was gone, listening, not to the workers, but to the faint pulse beneath the ground. It was stronger now, almost like chanting or breath echoing through caverns. I dreamed that night. In the dream, I stood inside a chamber filled with mirrors, though none of them showed my reflection. Each one reflected a different age. Men in bronze armor, scholars in linen robes, soldiers with rifles, drones hovering above ruins. The same sun, the same dust. In each reflection, someone was carving the same god's face, and every one of them had my eyes. When I woke, the horizon was burning red with dawn, and Sahira was knocking at my door. They're calling for you, she said breathlessly. The wall. Something's happening. I followed her, heart pounding. The workers had gathered before the carving I'd made of the falcon god. The morning light struck it perfectly, and the stone shimmered as if breathing again. But this time, the eyes glowed brighter. And below it, where no one had touched, new lines had appeared overnight. Words, symbols, carved into the stone without tool marks. Sahira's hand found mine. What does it say? I stared at the inscription, my scholar's instincts waking like old ghosts. The translation formed on my tongue before I realized I was speaking. The one who remembers will awaken what was forgotten. Nefer fell to his knees, muttering prayers. The high priest's expression darkened. You see, he hissed, the prophecy begins. But I couldn't look away, because beneath the words, barely visible, was a mark that should not exist in this world. An angular letter carved centuries too soon. An E, my own initial. I touched it, and the ground beneath us gave a faint, unmistakable tremor, like something ancient shifting in its sleep. Sahira whispered, What did you do? I didn't answer, because the truth was far worse than anything I could explain. I hadn't just uncovered history, I had triggered it. The tremor passed quickly, a shudder through the sand that left the air quivering like breath held too long. The workers scattered, some praying, others running for shelter. The high priest barked orders, his voice cutting through the confusion like steel through silk. Only Sahira remained beside me, her fingers clutching my wrist. When the dust settled, the carving still gleamed faintly, its eyes calm, unbroken. Whatever had stirred beneath the ground had not destroyed it. If anything, it had answered. That night, the entire settlement gathered at the edge of the temple grounds. Torches flickered against the dark, smoke curling like nervous thoughts. The priest declared a vigil to appease the gods. Offerings of grain and incense were burned, and chants rolled across the dunes until the stars seemed to hum. But amid the fear, I saw something else taking root. Curiosity, awe. The workers whispered my name, not with suspicion, but reverence. For the first time, the title Eliashar, the divine artisan, slipped from their tongues, and I, Elias Ward, archaeologist, rationalist, modern man, stood in the middle of it all, trembling between pride and panic. I had spent my life trying to understand miracles. Now I had become the cause of one. The next morning, Nefer approached my dwelling. His usual scowl was gone, replaced by something almost respectful. "The high priest wishes to see you again," he said, "but this time, the Pharaoh himself will be present." The words barely made sense. Pharaoh, the living god, a figure I had studied in textbooks and museum plaques, now asking for me. When I entered the temple court, sunlight cut through high columns, painting ribbons of light across polished floors. At the far end, seated upon a platform draped in linen, was the pharaoh. Young, sharp-eyed, wearing a crown that seemed too heavy for his age. I knelt before him, every modern instinct in me screaming against the gesture. But the air itself seemed to demand it. "You are the one who made the god breathe," he said, his voice steady but curious. "The priests say your hands are guided by the divine. Is this true?" I lifted my head just enough to meet his gaze. "My hands follow what my eyes see, Majesty. If the gods dwell in stone, perhaps they simply wish to be seen clearly." A murmur ran through the court, half admiration, half offense. But the pharaoh smiled faintly. "You speak boldly, Eliashar. Boldness pleases the gods, and it pleases me." He rose, descended from his dais, and gestured toward the outer walls. "We will build something new," he said, "a chamber for the sun itself, a place where the god may wake each dawn and find his reflection. You will design it." The words struck like thunder. Me, a man who'd studied ancient architecture through ruins and reconstructions, now ordered to create one from nothing. "My pharaoh," the high priest began carefully, "such a task." The pharaoh silenced him with a glance. "The gods have chosen their craftsmen. You will not question their will." I bowed again, more from shock than obedience. "I will serve," I said. And so began what they called the Chamber of Dawn. Weeks passed in a blur of labor and vision. I drew upon everything I remembered from my old life: geometry, engineering, even fragments of modern architectural theory, and disguised it as divine inspiration. I calculated angles by starlight, mapped shadow paths with bits of string and sand. Each measurement whispered of symmetry, of cosmic alignment. The workers followed without question. They said my designs were like hearing the voice of Ra himself. Sahira was among them, carrying water, grinding pigments, sometimes simply standing in the doorway to watch me think. "You're building something the world has never seen," she said one evening, as I sketched the sun's arc on a slab of limestone. "Or something it will one day forget," I replied. She frowned. "Why would the gods allow what they love to be forgotten?" "Because forgetting is how memory survives," I said quietly. "It becomes story, and story never dies." She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing beyond the man the world thought I was. You speak like someone who's been forgotten before. Her words hung between us and I didn't answer. The chamber rose from the desert like a mirage taking form, its walls angled precisely toward the equinox sunrise, its corridors aligned to catch the first light of dawn. Inside, I designed a central sculpture, the falcon god, wings outstretched, eyes set with polished obsidian that would capture the sun and throw it back across the chamber. The first test came on the morning of completion. The pharaoh himself stood beside me, Sahira just behind. The air was still, the workers silent. As the first ray of sunlight crossed the horizon, it entered the chamber's narrow slit and struck the god's eyes. For an instant, the entire room ignited in gold. The walls shimmered. The carvings glowed as though lit from within. And then, a sound, a deep, resonant hum, low as thunder. The workers fell to their knees. The pharaoh stared, wide-eyed. Even the high priest stepped back in awe. The light faded, but the echo of that hum remained. A vibration through the floor, through my bones. The pharaoh turned to me, voice trembling with something between fear and joy. You have awakened the dawn, Eliashar. You have made the god rise. Cheers erupted. The workers chanted my name. Sahira's eyes found mine, filled not with worship, but with something far more dangerous, belief. That night, the celebration spilled into the village. Drums, dancing, wine from clay jugs. Men painted symbols on their foreheads. Women threw flowers into the fire. But I couldn't join them. I sat alone outside the chamber, staring at the carved god glowing faintly in moonlight. Had I done this? Or had I simply completed something that had already been waiting for me to arrive? Sahira approached quietly, a cup of water in her hands. You should be proud, she said. They'll speak your name for generations. I shook my head. No, they'll forget me. They'll remember the god. That's how history works. She smiled gently. Then maybe the gods are kinder than history. For a long moment, we sat together in silence. The desert wind moved softly around us, carrying the scent of stone dust and fire. Do you believe it was a miracle? I asked. She thought for a moment. I believe it was real, and maybe that's all a miracle needs to be. When she left, I looked once more at the horizon. The stars above were exactly where I remembered them from my old life. But the earth beneath me, this ancient, trembling world, was beginning to shift. Somewhere in its depths, I could feel it again. That heartbeat, louder now, closer. Whatever I had built had not ended the prophecy. It had only given it a voice. The day after the Chamber of Dawn opened to the light, the desert felt heavier. The sky hung low, as if the gods themselves were leaning close to listen. The workers walked softer. Even laughter carried uneasily, like something fragile that might shatter if heard by the wrong wind. The pharaoh had declared a week of celebration, yet beneath the joy, suspicion stirred. The priests no longer looked at me with awe. They looked at me the way hunters study a trap that's caught something too clever. By the third day, Nefer came to me in secret. His voice was low, his eyes darting toward the shadows. The high priest says you've overstepped, he whispered. He claims your chamber bends light meant only for the divine. He says you've stolen from the sun itself. Stolen, I said, incredulous. It's geometry, not heresy. He shook his head. To them, those words are the same. That night I couldn't sleep. The air vibrated with distant chants. Incense smoke drifted in from the temple, thick and sweet, clinging to everything like warning. Sahira came quietly, barefoot, her face pale in the lamplight. They're gathering the priests at dawn, she said. They'll decide whether what you built honors the god or offends him. I tried to smile, but it came out hollow. And what do you believe? She hesitated, then moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I believe you've made something beautiful, and beauty terrifies men who worship power. She pressed something into my hand, a small clay seal marked with the sun disk. My father carved this years ago. He said it was used to bless the first foundation stones of the temple. If they turn against you, show them this. It might remind them that faith began with creation, not control. When she left, I sat staring at the seal until dawn broke. The summons came at sunrise. I walked through streets lined with people. Some touched their foreheads as I passed. Others spat in the dust. By the time I reached the temple, the crowd's murmur was a storm. Inside, torches burned along the corridor to the Chamber of Dawn. The pharaoh sat upon his throne, expression unreadable. The high priest stood beside him, draped in black linen rather than white, a symbol of mourning or judgment, I couldn't tell which. You are accused, the priest began, of conjuring false divinity. You built the chamber to draw power from the heavens and claim it as your own. I claim nothing, I said. I only revealed what was already there. Light is not theft, it's truth. Truth belongs to the gods, he thundered. Then perhaps the gods should not hide it, I answered before I could stop myself. A gasp rippled through the room. Even the pharaoh's guards shifted uneasily, but the pharaoh himself only leaned forward, intrigued rather than angered. Speak, he said quietly. You have built what no man has before. Tell us why. I took a breath, choosing words as carefully as if they were chisels on sacred stone. Because the gods you serve live in stone, in light, in the breath of men. I've seen their faces buried under centuries of dust. I've seen your descendants search for their names. You fear blasphemy, but what you call blasphemy is remembrance. The chamber fell utterly silent. Only the crackle of torchlight dared to move. Then the high priest's voice sliced through the stillness. You speak riddles of madness. You defy divine order. He turned to the pharaoh. The gods demand purification. It was the ancient word for execution. The pharaoh's expression darkened. But before he could speak, a tremor rumbled beneath our feet, faint but undeniable. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The torches flared blue. Screams erupted. The priests fell to their knees, chanting wildly. The god stirs! The god stirs! I turned toward the chamber. The statue of the falcon god glowed once more, but this time the light came from within. The obsidian eyes burned gold. The carved wings shimmered as if unfolding. And in the reflection of that impossible light, the pharaoh saw his own face merge with mine. He stumbled backward. The high priest cried out, You see? The mortal steals the god's image. But the pharaoh, trembling, whispered, No, he completes it. The glow faded. Silence returned. In its wake, the pharaoh's voice was soft but absolute. No man shall touch this chamber again. It is finished. Eliashar will serve under my protection. The priest bowed reluctantly, fury barely contained. I was free for now, but I could feel the walls tightening around me. Later that night, Sahira found me by the edge of the desert. I was sitting on a dune, watching the moon rise, feeling both victorious and doomed. You survived, she said. For now. She sat beside me. The sand whispered beneath her robes. What happened inside? I told her everything. The light, the voice, the reflection that wasn't mine alone. When I finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, My grandmother used to tell a story about a man who came from the stars to remind the gods how to love. They called him the Mirror Maker. And what happened to him, I asked. He finished his work, she said, and the gods, afraid of their own reflection, buried his name under sand. I laughed softly, bitterly. Then history's repeating itself. Sahira turned to me, her expression fierce and luminous. Then change it. Her words struck deep. Change it. Not record it. Not survive it. Change it. When she left, I stared at the horizon until dawn crept over the dunes. The chamber of dawn gleamed faintly in the distance, half holy, half haunted. And beneath my feet, the earth's heartbeat thudded louder, steadier, like a warning drum. The gods, or whatever ancient rhythm had caught me in its loop, were awake now. The world had seen me rise. Now it was preparing to resist. By the time the desert winds changed, the Chamber of Dawn had become both sanctuary and prison. The pharaoh called it a miracle. The priest called it a warning. The people whispered that the God himself now walked among men, wearing my face. Days blurred into each other. I was forbidden to work, forbidden to leave the temple grounds. Nefer still brought me food, avoiding my eyes as though proximity to me might anger heaven. Only Sahira came without fear. She claimed she was delivering water to the inner court, but I knew better. One evening, she appeared as the last light died. The chamber's walls, gold by day, now shimmered faintly silver under moonlight. "They'll move against you soon," she said. The high priest met with the pharaoh's council at dusk. I heard my father whisper it through the stonemasons. They planned to cleanse the temple. Cleanse, I repeated. Meaning destroy it? Meaning destroy you, she said. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You've changed everything, Eliashar. The sun rose inside your chamber before it touched the horizon. They say even the stars bend to your hand. You've made the gods jealous." Jealous? The word almost made me laugh. I was a man lost in time, fumbling through miracles I didn't understand. Yet when I looked at the chamber's central statue, its obsidian eyes now dull, its mouth carved in quiet defiance, I couldn't shake the sense that it was waiting for me to act. "I won't run," I said. "If they destroy me, then so be it, but they won't destroy truth." Sahira's gaze hardened. "Truth isn't what saves people, it's what kills them." She reached into her robe and drew out something wrapped in linen. "My father found this years ago, hidden beneath the oldest foundation stones. He never told anyone." She unwrapped it carefully, a small copper tablet etched with symbols unlike any I'd ever seen. They weren't Egyptian, not hieroglyphs, not cuneiform, not any known script. But I recognized one thing, the pattern of circles and spirals interlocking like a celestial map. "This," I breathed, "this shouldn't exist." "It does," she said, "and you can read it." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Her certainty froze me. She didn't mean language. She meant memory. My fingers brushed the copper, tracing a familiar pattern, a curve I'd seen before in a digital scan in my own century. It had been carved onto a tablet found in Abydos, its origin a mystery even among scholars. I'd spent months studying it before the tunnel collapse. And now here it was, new, unoxidized, glowing faintly under the flame. Time folded on itself. The scholar and the artifact, the future and the past, each was the other's echo. I turned it over, and there it was, a single symbol, engraved with such precision it looked machine-cut. The same letter I had seen beneath the god's inscription on the chamber wall. E, not Eliashar, Elias, me. Sahira watched as the realization crawled across my face. "You've been here before," she said quietly. "Haven't you?" "Not here," I whispered. "But maybe always." She stepped back, shaking her head. "The priests say the gods write their stories in circles, not lines. Maybe you are one of them." "I'm no god," I said. "I'm a man who fell through his own excavation." She stared at me as if deciding whether to believe me or whether belief even mattered. "Then perhaps your fall was the gods' way of remembering themselves." Before I could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, dozens of them. We hid the tablet beneath a loose slab, just as Nefer burst into the chamber, breathless. "They're coming," he said. "The priests, all of them. The pharaoh's protection won't last the night." "How many?" "Enough to make it a sacrifice." The torches outside flared brighter. The chanting began, low, rhythmic, ancient. I recognized fragments of the words: purify, renew, erase. Sahira's eyes met mine. There's a hidden passage, she whispered, the old water route beneath the chamber. My father told me once, it leads to the desert caves. I can't leave, I said. If I go, they'll destroy everything we built. She seized my arm. Then you'll die with it. Before I could respond, a roar filled the hall, the temple doors slamming open, the priests spilling inside with torches and jars of oil. Blasphemer, the high priest shouted. The gods will have silence. Nefer pushed me toward the rear wall, his eyes wild. Go, I'll hold them. I can't leave you. Go! He turned, swinging a mason's hammer against the brazier, scattering fire. The flames caught the oil in an instant, and chaos erupted. Sahira dragged me toward the statue. She pressed her palm to the stone near its base, whispering something I didn't catch. The stone groaned, shifted, and a narrow passage yawned open behind it, exhaling cool air that smelled of earth and age. Go, she said again. We slipped inside, sealing the slab behind us. Darkness swallowed us whole. The passage wound downward, twisting through the bedrock. My fingers traced the walls, smooth, too smooth, as if shaped by something beyond chisel or tool. The air grew cooler, denser. After what felt like hours, a faint glow appeared ahead. We emerged into a cavern vast enough to hold a cathedral. The ceiling glittered with mineral veins that caught the light from some unseen source. And there, at the center, stood another structure, small, circular, perfect. It was a chamber, an exact mirror of the one I had built above. Sahira's breath hitched. What is this place? I approached the central dais. The same carvings adorned its walls, but newer, sharper, as though made yesterday. In its center lay a single slab of stone, engraved with more of the spiral script, and in its heart, an empty recess shaped precisely like the copper tablet. My pulse thundered. I placed the tablet into the recess. The chamber hummed, soft at first, then deeper, until the walls seemed to vibrate. Light spilled from the carvings, washing everything in amber and white. Sahira cried out, shielding her eyes. Eliashar, what's happening? The spirals began to move. The patterns expanded outward, connecting, aligning. I understood, without logic, without translation, what they meant. It wasn't language, it was instruction, a design for the chamber above, an exact geometric map of everything I had built, and everything I was meant to build next. The hum deepened into a voice, not heard, but felt, like thought turned inside out. The Maker remembers, the Maker returns, the circle must close. I stumbled backward. What are you? The light pulsed once, answering with a memory instead of words, images flooding my mind. I saw myself kneeling beside the same tablet centuries later, brushing dust from its surface. I saw my hands sketching its spirals in a notebook. I saw the tunnel collapsing, the world tilting, the sand swallowing me whole. And then this, the same desert, reborn, the same design, remade. I wasn't meant to discover the past. I was meant to complete it. The chamber above wasn't an act of worship. It was a mechanism, and I was the key. The light faded slowly, leaving silence so deep it felt alive. Sahira stared at me, eyes wide. Eliashar, what did you see? Not the gods, I said hoarsely. The truth that created them. From above, faint and distant, came the sound of collapse. The temple falling, the chamber breaking open. The world I had built was dying, but beneath it something older had awakened. The rumble from above did not fade. It deepened, became a roar that rolled through the cavern, like thunder trapped beneath the world. The air itself seemed to breathe, inhaling dust, exhaling history. Sahira grabbed my arm, eyes wide. It's collapsing. No, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. It's awakening. The copper tablet still pulsed faintly in its recess. Its spirals turned, not carved now, but alive, spinning with slow, cosmic grace. The light from the patterns flickered over Sahira's face, painting her in golden shadow. From the far end of the cavern came a sound. Footsteps. Not many, but heavy, deliberate. I turned and Nefer emerged from the passage, coughing. Blood streaked across his forehead. "They're gone," he rasped. "The priests. The fire took them all. The pharaoh. I don't know. The temple is ash." He looked around the cavern, awe momentarily overcoming exhaustion. "What is this place?" "The first chamber," I said. "The one the others were built to imitate." Sahira touched the wall, tracing the glowing script. "Then this is where it began." I shook my head slowly. "No, this is where it loops. It never began, and it never ends." Nefer frowned, too practical for riddles. "If it never ends, then what happens to us?" Before I could answer, the chamber trembled again. This time the spirals flared violently bright. The light surged outward, filling the air with something tangible, like heat, like thought. And then it spoke again, not as before, but through us. "The Maker remembers. The circle closes. The vessel must return." I felt it inside my chest, pressing outward, as if something vast and unseen were trying to use me as a doorway. My knees buckled. Sahira knelt beside me, shouting something I couldn't hear. The world had become soundless light. I saw flashes, moments out of order, lifetimes tangled like roots. I was carving the chamber. I was studying it in a museum. I was falling through the tunnel. I was lying beneath a sky that never aged. And through it all, her face, the same eyes, the same voice, across centuries, across dust. Sahira, the mason's daughter. Sahira, the student who once helped me translate the Abitus tablet back in my own time. Different lives, same soul. I gasped as the light receded. My skin felt electrified, humming with borrowed memory. I looked at her, trembling. "You were there. You were with me." She blinked. "Eliashar." "No, before. Before this. In my world. You—" She shook her head violently. "I don't understand." "You don't have to. I do." Nefer stepped back, crossing himself in an old gesture of protection. "Whatever this is, it's not holy." "No," I said softly. "It's human." That was when the ceiling split. A crack tore across the rock, spilling light and sand. The world above was collapsing, and the first chamber, the true heart of the design, was being buried again, sealing itself in time's unbroken circle. Nefer shouted, "The exit! There's another way out!" He ran toward the far wall where a narrow passage wound upward. Sahira pulled at my hand. "Come on!" But I couldn't move. The copper tablet was glowing again, brighter now, almost white-hot. Something in me knew. If it was left behind, this place would close forever. The knowledge, the proof, would vanish with it. I yanked it free from the recess. The instant it left the stone, the hum stopped. Silence crashed over us like a wave. And then came the sound of rock breaking, stone against stone, and the ceiling began to fall. We ran. The tunnel rose sharply, spiraling through darkness. Behind us, the first chamber imploded, its final breath a storm of dust and light. I could feel the heat of it on my back, the vibration in my ribs. We burst through an opening into cold air and dawn, the desert above. The temple was gone, nothing but rubble, blackened pillars, and the distant glow of fires still eating what had once been a city of worship. Nefer fell to his knees, coughing blood. "It's over," he whispered. "Everything's gone." I stared at the horizon where the sun rose, steady, untroubled. No, I said. It's starting again. Sahira sank beside me, her face streaked with soot, her hair tangled. Eliashar, she said, her voice shaking, what did that thing do to you? It showed me the truth. At what truth? That history isn't written by gods or kings. It's written by those who remember. And memory is a circle. I unwrapped the tablet. Its glow had dimmed, but faint traces of light still moved beneath the copper, like embers refusing to die. Nefer rose unsteadily. If the priests see that, they'll burn you alive. There are no priests left, I said. He gave a bitter laugh. Then I'll do it myself. Before I could react, he lunged, snatching the tablet. We grappled, dust flying, adrenaline burning through exhaustion. The artifact struck the ground between us, ringing like struck metal. Sahira cried out, "Stop! You'll—" Too late. The tablet shattered, not into pieces, but into dust, dissolving into the air like smoke. For a moment, nothing. Then the earth groaned. A pulse rippled through the sand, radiating outward in all directions, like a stone thrown into water. The sun flickered, once, twice. Sahira screamed as the horizon split open in a line of impossible light. The dunes bent like waves. The sky fractured, blue turning to bronze, bronze to black. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a wasteland of glass. The temple was gone. The city gone. Only the pyramid's half-built silhouette remained, its shadow broken and bent. Nefer was nowhere. Only Sahira lying beside me, barely conscious. I crawled to her, my throat raw. "You're alive," she smiled weakly. "You always say that. Every time." My breath caught. "Every time." Her hand trembled against mine. "Every time you build it again." Her eyes fluttered closed, and with her last breath, the realization settled over me like the weight of centuries. She had remembered too. She had lived this cycle as many times as I had. The chamber, the prophecy, the collapse, every version, every age. We were its architects and its prisoners. As the sun rose over the shattered desert, I held her hand and whispered into the wind, "This time I'll break it." But the wind carried back a voice that wasn't mine, soft, eternal, echoing from somewhere deeper than memory. "You said that before." When I woke, the world was ash and silence. The air shimmered faintly with heat, as if time itself had just burned away. The desert stretched endless, a field of white glass where once there had been walls, homes, prayers. Sahira lay beside me, still and weightless as dust. The wind tugged at her hair, weaving it into the shifting sand. I reached for her wrist, cold but not empty. Her pulse was faint, distant, a thread stretched between two worlds. For a moment I just knelt there, the sun bleeding up from the horizon, and wondered if I had finally crossed the last threshold, if this was death or some echo that refused to let me go. But the pain in my chest was too real, too raw. This wasn't an afterlife, this was aftermath. I carried her to the shade of what was once a stone archway, half collapsed, its carvings melted into smooth curves. The Chamber of Dawn was gone, buried beneath glass. Yet when I looked toward the rising light, I saw something impossible. Across the horizon, far beyond the dunes, a second structure stood. New, whole. Its edges caught the dawn with the same perfect angles I had once drawn by hand. The chamber had rebuilt itself. I stared at it, half in awe, half in horror. "You won't die, will you?" I murmured. "You'll just keep remembering." A groan beside me, Sahira's breath catching. Her eyes opened slowly, clouded but alive. "Eliashar, I'm here." She tried to sit, wincing. "We didn't stop it, did we?" "No." I looked at the horizon again. "But maybe now we understand it." Her gaze followed mine. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Beauty's the trap," I said quietly. That's how it survives. She leaned against me, exhausted. Then what do we do? For the first time since awakening in this world, I didn't have an answer. Every theory, every principle I'd built my life on had crumbled with the temple. Archaeology had always been about uncovering the past. I'd never imagined I could be the one creating it, over and over again. Sahira took my hand. When I was a child, she said softly, my father used to tell me that the gods built the world again and again because they couldn't bear to see it end. Maybe that's what this is. No, I said, this isn't divinity, it's recursion, a memory trap. She smiled faintly, and you're the memory. Something shifted inside me, a recognition that wasn't comfort but clarity. I remembered the copper tablet, its design, the words carved on the wall. The one who remembers will awaken what was forgotten. Maybe the only way to break the loop wasn't to destroy it, but to forget it. I looked at her, heart pounding. If memory is what keeps it alive, then memory is what we have to end. Her brow furrowed. End memory? Yes. Bury it deeper than history. Make it myth. The chamber, the gods, all of it. Let it fade. She shook her head. But that means I'd have to forget you, I finished. Her silence hurt worse than fire. The new chamber gleamed on the horizon like an open eye. It wasn't waiting for builders. It was waiting for recognition. I rose unsteady. It's not enough to walk away. Someone has to go back in. Sahira caught my hand. You can't. It'll take you again. It already has, I said. I've been part of this since the first circle. She stood trembling. Then let me come with you. No. Her grip tightened. You said we built it together. That's why one of us has to stay. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, the way people do when they already know what goodbye sounds like. I touched her cheek, memorizing her face. The face I'd seen in frescoes, in mirrors, in dreams older than civilization. If this works, I said, you'll forget me. You'll live your life as if none of this ever happened. Her whisper barely reached me. And if it doesn't, then we'll remember forever. I walked toward the horizon. The dunes shifted under my feet like waves. The closer I came to the chamber, the more the air trembled, humming with that same low pulse I had felt since the day I awoke here. When I reached its threshold, I stopped. The structure was flawless, every line of it precisely as I had designed, yet untouched by any hand. Inside, the light was not sunlight but memory, bending and refracting through invisible glass. I stepped into it, and the hum rose into a chorus. Voices not separate but overlapping, countless versions of myself whispering across ages. You said that before. You will say it again. The maker remembers. The central dais glowed, waiting. I climbed the steps slowly, each one echoing like a heartbeat. Eliashar, a voice said behind me. Sahira, no, not Sahira. Her image, drawn from my memory, standing in the doorway, eyes full of stars. You're not her, I said. Does it matter? The vision asked gently. I hesitated. Then, no. I placed my palm on the dais. The patterns beneath it came alive, spinning faster, folding inward, until light poured through me. I felt my memories unravel. The dig site, the collapse, the first dawn, her laughter, her touch, all dissolving into gold dust. The chamber spoke in that voiceless tone again. To break the circle, the maker must release himself. Then take it, I whispered. Take everything. Pain, sharp, endless, then weightlessness. I saw the world above, cities rising, pyramids eroding, empires built and buried, millennia passing like waves. The chamber darkened, its glow fading until it became nothing more than stone and silence. And then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in the sand, under a sky filled with stars. No chamber, no ruin, just desert and wind. My clothes were not linen but modern fabric. Dusty, torn, my hands were my own again. A helicopter's rotor echoed in the distance. Headlights cut through the night. Voices, English, sharp, urgent. Dr. Ward, Elias Ward, my God, we found him. I blinked, the words strange and far away. Hands lifted me, carried me. Someone pressed water to my lips. How long? I croaked. 4 days, a medic said. You've been missing since the collapse. 4 days. And yet I remembered years. As they loaded me into the helicopter, I looked back once, toward the desert where the chamber should have been. There was nothing. No structure, no ruins, no trace of a civilization that should never have existed. But as the engine roared to life, I saw something flicker on the horizon. Just for an instant, a shimmer of light shaped like a falcon's wings catching the dawn. And faintly, impossibly, I heard a voice in the wind. The Maker remembers. They flew me back to Cairo at night. The desert unrolled below, like a map of old scars, the lights of excavation camps glimmering faintly, fragile as constellations pretending to be stars. I didn't speak. The rescue team assumed shock. They were right, but not in the way they thought. At the hospital, they checked my lungs, my blood, my skull. Dehydration, possible concussion, hallucinations likely, said one of the doctors, tapping his clipboard like punctuation. I let him believe it. It was easier than explaining that I had just built the first myth of mankind and then erased it with my own hands. When they left, I lay in the sterile light and watched the ceiling breathe. The sound of the heart monitor reminded me of that old subterranean pulse, the heartbeat of the world, muffled but still alive. I wasn't free. I was back, and the circle had followed me. They kept me for observation, then moved me to a recovery suite at the Institute. Colleagues visited, faces shifting between relief and curiosity. "You're a miracle, Elias," one said. "No one survives a cave-in like that." Miracle. The word stung. I smiled politely, though my mind replayed Sahira's last words, echoing across centuries. You always say that. Every time. By the second week, I was cleared to return to my quarters. My possessions from the dig had been salvaged. Books, notes, soil samples, and a metal box labeled Ward Abidos Find 14C. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were fragments of the copper tablet, not whole, broken, oxidized, but unmistakably there. They shouldn't have existed. The tablet had dissolved into air. Yet here it was, a handful of relics whispering we remember. That night I poured whiskey into a glass and stared at the fragments under lamplight. The etchings were faint, but I traced them instinctively, my mind reconstructing the spirals. Halfway through, I realized my hand was moving without thought, sketching patterns that weren't mine, but theirs. And when I reached the center, my pen hesitated. There, where the spirals met, I drew a single letter. E. I dropped the pen. The air felt charged, alive, like the instant before lightning strikes. The glass on my desk trembled. Then came the whisper, soft, familiar, the voice that had haunted every version of my life. The Maker remembers. I turned slowly. She was standing by the window. Sahira. Not a ghost, not ancient, modern. Jeans, white shirt, hair tied back, eyes the same impossible green. She looked exactly as I remembered her, except for the faint shimmer at her edges, like heat rising from sand. "This isn't real," I said. "Neither was that," she answered calmly. "But here we are." I stood, every nerve on fire. "How?" "You didn't break it," she said softly. "You only moved it forward." "The chamber," she nodded. "The chamber remembers. It's still building itself every time someone discovers it, every time you write about it. The circle isn't stone anymore, it's thought." I laughed, harsh and helpless. So it's a contagion, an idea that rewrites history. Her gaze didn't waver. It's memory, and you, Elias Ward, are its guardian. I backed away. No, I ended it. She stepped closer. Did you? The copper fragments on the desk began to hum, a low, resonant vibration. Light seeped from their cracks, spreading across the surface, forming the familiar pattern. Sahira's reflection shimmered in it, younger now, her ancient self superimposed over the modern. You've been fighting the loop, she said, but maybe the loop isn't punishment. Maybe it's purpose. Purpose? I snapped. To relive the same tragedy until the sun burns out? To remember what would otherwise be forgotten? Her voice trembled with something that wasn't faith but sorrow. Every age buries what came before. Every civilization forgets the hands that shaped it. You are the proof that remembrance endures. The gods aren't jealous. They're terrified of being erased. You keep them alive. I shook my head. That's not life. That's a prison. Then break it this time, she said, stepping into the circle of light. But if you destroy it completely, the memory dies with it. All of it. Every person, every story, every version of us. Her eyes caught the lamplight, green, endless. Even me. I froze. The truth unfolded in silence. To end the circle, I'd have to erase her too. The woman I'd met across ages, who had followed me through temples and tombs, who had loved me in lives neither of us remembered choosing. I wanted to tell her I couldn't, but the fragments on the desk began to spin. The spiral widened, light blooming outward like a slow explosion. Books rattled, glass cracked. I saw reflections flicker in the light. Every version of me, every version of her, scattered through time, an infinite recursion of creation and loss. Choose, the voice whispered. Sahira reached out her hand. Remember me. The light pulsed again. Another voice, my own, older, calm. Forget us. The room split, half filled with memory, half with silence. If I chose her, the chamber would continue, reborn in every age. If I chose oblivion, history would dissolve. Clean, peaceful, empty. My hand hovered over the fragments. Sahira's eyes met mine. Whatever you decide, she said softly, you've already decided before. I almost laughed at the cruel symmetry of it. Maybe the loop had never been about fate. Maybe it was just inertia. Memory refusing to die because someone kept loving what should have been forgotten. I whispered, then let it rest. And I pressed my palm flat against the glowing spiral. A shock like lightning tore through me, cold, bright, absolute. I saw cities collapsing, rivers reversing, hieroglyphs turning blank. The chamber dissolved. The pyramids cracked and fell. Time folded inward until only one heartbeat remained, mine. Then silence. When I opened my eyes again, the room was dark. The fragments were gone. My notebook lay open to a blank page. The air was still, the hum gone, and Sahira gone too. No photograph of her on the shelf, no mention of her in any record, not even a trace in my field notes. Yet my hands still remembered the warmth of hers. My chest still ached where her name should have been. I closed my notebook and wrote a single line on the first page. History is what refuses to forget. Then I put down the pen and exhaled. Outside, dawn crept over Cairo. For the first time, it was just light. No hum, no echo, no pulse. The circle, perhaps, was finally broken. But as the sun rose, the glass of my window caught the light. And for a fraction of a second, a shadow moved across it. The faint outline of wings. And somewhere deep inside the silence of my own heartbeat, a whisper lingered. The Maker remembers. Weeks passed before I could speak of it again. Not to anyone alive, at least. The Institute called the collapse a geological anomaly. A sand pocket cave-in, they wrote in their report, exacerbated by decades of structural erosion. My colleagues celebrated the rediscovery of what they called the proto-solar complex, an unfinished tomb built by unknown hands. They were eager to date it, to catalog it, to write papers about it. I signed none of them. Sometimes at night, I'd wake convinced I could still smell the dust of that world, the warm sweetness of resin, the sharpness of bronze dust, the quiet weight of stone waiting to remember. Then I'd sit at my desk, open a fresh page, and remind myself that everything had been erased. And yet, erasure is never perfect. One morning I received a parcel with no return address. Inside was a small clay seal, shaped like a sun disk, faintly cracked but unmistakably real. I'd seen it before, on the day Sahira gave it to me in that other life. The courier said a local shepherd had found it near the excavation site, half buried after a sandstorm. No artifacts were supposed to remain, I told him. He just shrugged. The desert gives back what it likes, doctor. I turned the seal over in my palm. The back bore no mark, no inscription. But when sunlight struck it at an angle, I caught the faintest impression. 3 concentric circles, each revolving around a single point, a spiral. For the rest of the day, I couldn't concentrate. Every page of my notes seemed to hum faintly. At dusk, I went down to the Nile embankment and skipped the seal into the water, watching the ripples vanish into gold. Rest, I whispered. But that night, the dreams returned. I was walking through a corridor of mirrors again, endless, shimmering, each reflection showing a different age. A man in linen, a soldier in bronze, a scholar with a notebook, all of them me, and standing among them, watching, was Sahira. Her hair was bound with gold thread, her eyes calm as tides. "You kept your promise," she said. "I forgot you." She smiled sadly. "Forgetting isn't the same as letting go." I reached for her, but she stepped back, fading like the echo of a flame. "The circle is broken," she said, "but the memory remains where it belongs, inside you, not around you. Live now, Elias. The past no longer needs you." I woke before dawn, heart racing. The window was open. A faint wind stirred the curtains, carrying the smell of sand and myrrh, impossible scents from a vanished age. The city outside was quiet, modern, unremarkable. Taxis glided past, vendors shouted over bread and tea. Life went on, heedless of lost worlds. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank document waiting for me. For the first time in years, I hesitated to write. What if words themselves were the seeds of memory? What if recording this rebuilt the loop? But silence is its own kind of prison. So I began slowly, carefully, not as a scholar, but as a witness. I wrote about falling through time, about stone that breathed, about a woman who remembered across lifetimes. I wrote until the sun climbed high and the room filled with warmth. And when I reached the end, I did something I had never done before. I saved the file, then deleted it. Not out of fear, but gratitude. Let the story live only where stories are meant to, inside the living, not the written. In the weeks that followed, I returned to the desert once more, not to dig, not to search, just to stand beneath the same indifferent sky and breathe. The dunes were smooth, unbroken, save for a single ridge of darker sand that curved like the shadow of a buried structure. I could have ordered a survey. I didn't. Instead, I sat until the sun dipped low, and for a moment, the light caught the horizon in a way that turned the air gold. A shimmer, brief, delicate, shaped like the wings of a falcon lifting into flight. I smiled. "I see you," I said softly. "Just once more." The wind answered with a whisper, gentle, almost playful. "The Maker remembers." And this time, it didn't sound like a curse. It sounded like a benediction. I walked back toward the car as twilight bled across the sand. The stars rose, unblinking. For the first time, they didn't look like eyes watching me. They looked like openings, possibilities. Maybe history isn't a circle after all. Maybe it's a spiral, widening with every telling, lifting upward through memory into understanding. As I drove away, I thought of the men who built temples for gods they feared, and the archaeologists who unearthed them centuries later, chasing meanings already lost. Between them, there would always be someone like me, someone foolish enough to listen to the silence and call it truth. At the last ridge, I stopped the car and looked back one final time. The desert glowed faintly in the starlight, smooth and endless. I could almost believe it had never held anything at all. Almost. I whispered, half to myself, half to whatever still listened. Sleep well, my love. May the gods never remember you. Then I turned the key, and the engine started. The world moved forward again.